Okay, Ani Bojo, thank you for coming. It was described earlier what Ani means, or Bojo means, so I won't go through that again, but my name is Natalya Garrod, for those of you who didn't see the opening. Today I'll be leading you through a session on collaborative conservation with Indigenous leaders. Miigwech for attending, I really appreciate that, and I'm really excited today about what we're going to listen and hear. So, today we have 3 panelists, and we're going to share their perspective. We're going to hear their perspectives. Each of these individuals have devoted their lives to conservation, and it's evident in their work. I'll start by introducing Doran Ritchie. Doran, do you want to wave your hand? Doran is an Indigenous governance specialist with decades of experience in rights-based conservation and co-governance. His work focuses on bridging Western and Indigenous knowledge systems, translating worldviews into governance models that strengthen Indigenous sovereignty while creating practical pathways for collaboration. He has led initiatives aligning UNESCO principles with ethical space and two-eyed seeing, building partnerships across governments, municipalities, and industries as well. His leadership emphasizes advocacy, conservation, and inclusive frameworks that connect ecological stewardship with shared prosperity. Next, we have Clint Jacobs. Oh, sorry, one second. So Clint is of Deer Clan. He's an Anishinaabe member of the Bkejwanong, which is Walpole Island. Sorry, Clint, if I butchered that. It's Walpole Island First Nation. He has worked in conservation and in the environmental field for over 25 years at the Walpole Island Heritage Center. Clint has also led the creation of the Walpole Island Land Trust to support and enable people's connections to nature. Clint now teaches at the Western University and the University of Windsor to help students understand their connections with responsibilities to nature and empower students to bring their gifts forward to reciprocate the love that nature shares with us. Clint was elected as a Walpole Island Councillor and is appointed as the Senior Advisor to the President of the Indigenous Initiatives at the University of Windsor. And finally, we have Miptoon. Miptoon, do you want to raise your hand? Thank you. Miptoon is an Anishinaabe elder, advocate, and head counselor of the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation. Known for his work in cultural and natural conservation, he serves as an elder, mentor, and member of an advisory committee at the University of Guelph, where he supports Indigenous initiatives such as Learning on the Land and the Indigenous Environmental Science and Practice program. Miptoon emphasizes experiential outdoor learning and has been instrumental in developing strategies to improve relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. So, as you can see, we have a very stacked panel. Thank you. And I'm here to facilitate the discussion. So, today's conversation invites us to rethink how we approach conservation, not as a field that incorporates Indigenous voices, but as one that is transformed by Indigenous leadership. Knowledge, governance, and deep relational responsibility with the land. So as a staff member of the ECA, I can speak on behalf of our goals and objectives. So the ECA has worked tirelessly to ensure that they are building positive relationships, relationships with the community, relationships with Indigenous communities who have connections to these lands, as well as governments and things like that. But in relation to Indigenous relationships, we are committed to a two-eyed seeing approach. So that means looking with both Indigenous and Western worldviews. So because we don't have the capacity to look through Indigenous worldviews, we collaborate. We create connections and relationships with these Indigenous communities and the people that speak for them. We also value scientific research. We have a wonderful conservation stewardship manager who is leading in that, and she has a lot of knowledge in Western science. So we believe in balancing this approach and trying to learn from both eyes. In protecting the Niagara Escarpment of Southern Georgian Bay, we recognize and are grateful for the long-standing relationships that these folks have with their land since time immemorial. We seek to actively engage with local communities and knowledge holders in a respectful and collaborative way. We aim to create ethical space where we can seek to understand and move forward in a good way. When I was taking I took a advanced planning certificate in Indigenous protected and conserved areas. And when I did that, we learned what the definition of ethical space was for that program. And what I learned was ethical space is understanding and acting in accordance with that understanding. So, in ethical space, we seek to understand and move forward in a good way together. This inclusive approach strengthens biodiversity and supports thriving ecosystems and communities, and ensures the long-term protection of this vital landscape. We are joined with some powerful voices here today, so let's learn from them. This session, as I stated earlier, it's not about learning from Indigenous leaders. It's about shifting how we work with them, how we create relationships with them, how we join in respect and reciprocity. So I'm going to start with the first question, and I'll start with Doran. So my question for you, and I'll premise this a little bit, it's how does Indigenous law and governance guide environmental stewardship in your community? So when I'm referring to Indigenous law, for those of you who don't know, we have the Canadian legal system that we tend to abide by here in Canada, but we also have Indigenous law. And Indigenous law is a law that's carried through culture and language and long-standing. It's something that Indigenous communities assert. So take it away.
Thank you, Natalya. That's a great question. If I may, I'm going to break that down into 3 different parts. First, what is Indigenous law? What is governance? And finally, merging that example into environmental stewardship. So the first point I want to make is that Mother Earth does not need managing. She needs remembering. Indigenous law, as you heard, is not written on paper, but it's rather a lived relationship. To put simply, it's the law of cause and effect, balance and reciprocity. These reflections come from my own path and lessons learned through my own experience and reconnection. So the essence of the law is simple. Do no harm, but take no complacency either. Governance is how those laws are carried out, through responsibility and relational accountability. Before there were humans, there was Bkejwanong, the Great Spirit, or as some would call Source. From that spirit came the 4 sacred elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. Each with a responsibility, each with a responsibility. And from that came the first teaching of governance. And that teaching is, everything has a duty and not power. From Sky Woman's descent and the muskrat sacrificed on the back of Turtle came Turtle Island. That's our living constitution. It teaches humility, cooperation, and balance. And true governance flows from that. It's not hierarchy, it's relationship. Before the Indian Act, systems reflected these ways of knowing. They were guided by women's councils, clan governance, and the principle of 7 generations. And finally, the example of environmental stewardship. When I worked in aggregate licensing, we had to create a structure that represented an Indigenous worldview effectively. And up until that point, there was no real process or Indigenous engagement strategy and no legislation at the time to protect species like the turtle. As you can see, that was an uphill battle, and we were effective by way of conveying the significance of the turtle and how it actually represents the earth itself. We used the principle of that teaching to change the conversation with aggregate operators, from conflict to understanding. This kind of balanced approach became a model for agreements, stewardship, education, reciprocity, and relationship. And my final point, Indigenous law guiding stewardship isn't about adding culture to policy. It's about realigning human decision-making with natural law. Thank you.
Thank you, I really appreciate that. Clint, would you like to add to that?
Similarly, I thinking about Indigenous law, it's not something that's written on paper. It's written on our hearts, and it's meant to be practiced and lived on a daily basis. And it's intricately tied to our spirituality. Where I come from, Bkejwanong, we're home to probably more rare and endangered species anywhere in the province, possibly the country. And it's the reason why Bkejwanong Wapalan First Nation is a biodiversity hotspot with nearly 100 of Canada's species at risk that make it their home. Thinking about that question, it's those Indigenous laws are being rekindled, fostered, relearned, taught to a new generation through our language immersion school, land-based education efforts. It's a basis to our responsibilities and connection to nature, creation, and used to guide our ongoing relationships to the land and care for all our relations, the plants, the animals, everything in creation. We established the Wapalan Land Trust over 17 years ago. My community restarted efforts to protect water and began, through ceremony, sacred water walks across our islands from one watercourse, we're in a delta, to another watercourse, and completed it with water ceremony, with drum, song, prayers, moving towards designating our watercourses with personhood status. We're connecting and working with other First Nation communities in our shared territory of southwestern Ontario through the Wawi-Yatanang Treaty Council, which is made up of members from Anishinaabe, Bkejwanong, Kettle, Stony Point, Caldwell, Chippewas at the Thames First Nation. We have First Nation Guardians programs that are training young people to monitor our homeland. And my homeland covers southwestern Ontario, northeastern Michigan, and northern Ohio, and working with others to restore habitats.
Very rare, I use notes. I try and remember all the teachings that were given to me over my short lifespan. So it's something that is very important to us. If we don't follow the teachings in any home, one of the sad things that I realize is that we're not taking care of Mother Earth. We don't tread upon her gently, gracefully, but we walk and we litter. I support this particular organization simply for we can work together. You need to put that trusting relationship in your heart so that we can do this. One of the very important things that we need to know is certain terminology that you got to be careful of when you're addressing First Nation people. We don't have an animistic belief. We have a true belief within our heart and mind that we're protecting nature. That's a law that was given to us. I was sharing with a couple of people earlier that on the importance of the trees. When the trees go, not very far along we go. We don't have that communication with wildlife, the water, or the trees anymore, simply because we allowed our intellect to be too scientific that we got to study. By the time we finish studying them, our ash tree, our emerald ash borer are dying, our beech are sick, our maple are sick, our oak are sick. And in the language they're saying to us, not monshin, which means help me. There's a teaching that I hold close to, and that's not to talk to me back to back. Back-to-back teaching doesn't do anything for me. If you want to work with me, turn and look at me, not back-to-back. Because we leave And you would say, oh, did I ever have a good talk with Miptoon? Then I go and I say, same old, because I don't feel nothing here. One of the important things you need to know is how are we going to help the trees? How are we going to help the plants? A few years ago, I spotted, wasn't me, but because I'm the bird man, not of Alcatraz, but of Anishinaabe. I'm going to give you 3 birds. Remember, I'm giving you 10 things, so pay attention. The Lewis woodpecker, tricolored herring, okay? And it's very important, and I'm going to give you 1 plant, and it's the white prairie fringe orchid. They're all on the species at risk list. Great looking things, so it's important that we understand that. If you want to stand similar to this, my friend next to me, they were going to do some construction. He stood in front of the bulldozer. That's what we need to do if developers aren't listening to us. But I must applaud the government if they're going to give us that land to protect. But we got to do it together. You can't do it alone, you. It's all of us together as human beings. Oh, Chimiigwech.
I hope you're taking notes. It's going to be hard to remember all this. You got a lot of wisdom coming at you today. So my second question is, what do you wish more non-Indigenous conservation organizations understood about Indigenous knowledge systems?
Great question. What I'm about to say, I promise, is not a negative, but it's very much along the lines with my friends here to the left of me, is that Mother Earth does not need more management plans. She needs more relationships. And that starts with us individually. Indigenous knowledge systems are living relationships that move with the cycles of the day, the seasons, and the generations. Knowledge isn't something that you hold. It's something that you live through reciprocity. Western science and Indigenous knowledge are not opposites. They're complementary. Science brings precision. Indigenous knowledge brings context and spirit. Together, they form the balance of the mind, the body, and the spirit of knowing. Indigenous knowledge isn't a data set or a checkbox. It's governance and it's law in motion. So when this replaces tokenism, sorry, let me say that again. When collaboration replaces tokenism, science and spirit finally serve the same purpose, and that is to remember our place within creation. Miigwech.
Again, the question was, what do you wish more non-Indigenous conservation organizations understood about Indigenous knowledge systems? My thoughts were, Indigenous knowledge systems have stood the test of time. They're millennia old. Their simplicity is filled with wisdom. It's not complicated. They're meant to be practiced, not tucked away, hidden away, written on plans that will be shelved and forgotten. I don't like the idea of incorporating Indigenous knowledge. Instead, I ask folks to focus on involving Indigenous elders, knowledge holders, those that work on the land. Not just asking them for their knowledge, have them apply their knowledge, not steal it. There is issues, historic issues of trust. Knowledge has been appropriated. Knowledge has been stolen. And so he asked that folks involve knowledge holders. Ensure understanding of and implementation of First Nations OCAP principles, ownership, control, access, possession. And ensuring that information is collected in ethical ways protected, utilized, and shared based off of First Nation ethics protocols regarding that knowledge. Miigwech.
I'm terrible at sitting down, so I'm going to get down here for a minute. I'm a roamer. When I sit here, I lose my concentration, but what they're saying here is very important. So if you really want to work with us, close the gap. Protect your mother. I look at that, if anyone that's a mother here, you would do anything to protect your children, grandchildren, anything. One of the important things that we need to understand is that when knowledge is shared, it's shared here, not to be put in a book. We walk together, we talk together in everything that we do. As soon as there's a gap there, the trust that was mentioned is broken. How do you reconnect that trust? It's something that's very, very important to me. That if we're willing to work with an organization, I check what they're saying to me first. One of the important things that when I first met Natalya, she come to Anishinaabe. She came to Anishinaabe to try and get a reconnection. And I'm thankful for that because not very many groups will do that. And so one of the important things I want you to truly understand of who we are, close that gap. One of the elements of the teaching in Anishinaabe culture is trust. When that trust is broken, how are you going to reconnect? Now, this is my teaching tool for you. Trip. Turn that way. No, stay there. There's the gap that's in our trust relationship. How do you reconnect? If you had a fight with your spouse, how do you reconnect? You go up to them and saying, I will do better, trust me this time, or I'm sorry. The thing is, put action into words. Kind of meet me halfway. In all the teachings, the wampum teachings show us holding hands like this forever. Let's reconnect like that, and before you leave here today, we're going to form a circle, and we're going to connect and let the energy fly through us. Those are what I have for you, but most of all, you got to come and walk and listen to the teachings. Not on tape, in life, okay? That's my commitment.
I forgot to mention we're going to have some participation. I hope you're all ready to stand up at some point. I also wanted to add just a little bit from my own experience. So before I became the CEO of Caldwell, I was working on an Indigenous law, and we were drafting it. And I went to the community for a community engagement, and I asked, how can we codify this law? How can we create a law that the nation knows and that external parties know that we can share? And I learned something about Indigenous knowledge systems on that day. I was told, we can't write it down. And being a non-Indigenous person, I struggled because I thought, well, if we can't write it down, how are we going to share it with everybody? How are they going to know? And at the end of the day, what I was told was, if you write it down, it might be misinterpreted, similar to the treaties. And I think that when we create a culture and we share information and knowledge, and we really grasp that knowledge, we don't have to write it down because it's built into a culture. And that's why I think with Indigenous communities, their culture is so strong and has lasted so many years, because you don't write it down, you pass it on, and you keep passing it. And it's done through language, through words, through passing it on verbally. So that's just my anecdote. The third question. When non-Indigenous conservation groups want to partner with your nation, what does respectful collaboration look like, and what does it not look like?
So when we think of collaboration, I don't want to think of just the word access. And that's generally what that feels like, especially if you're new to Indigenous relations or wanting to go into a community. You'd think access is primary number one, but the purpose, I believe, of that reconnection is for the purpose of integrity. That's the most important thing when going into an Indigenous community. Working for as long as I've done, I've seen partnerships that work and partnerships that don't. And some of the key things have not been about funding, but it's been about the integrity of that actual relationship. Far too often, partnerships are built solely on political structure and less on the people. What's important about that is most nations in Canada are still functioning under the Indian Act, and that's a system that was designed to centralize authority without building accountability or balance. And there's elements in our communities that we're still healing from as Indigenous people. But respectful collaboration really begins when organizations realize that reality and connect with the people, and in doing so, working with that accountability and relationship mechanism. Also show up consistently. It was a very strong message that was sent. Go into the community, identify someone that you can connect with and bridge that gap. That will take some time to listen, to share, and sharing resources fairly and committing long term. And as you go along, a lot of those relationships will be codified by things like sharing your principles and sealing within ceremony and a shared meal. So think of collaboration like a living thing, and keep integrity as that heartbeat. Build it like a fire with purpose, patience, and respect. Miigwech.
The question again was, when non-Indigenous groups want to partner with your nation, what does respectful collaboration look like or not? And again, that respectful collaboration is formed on trust and meaningful relationship building. Consider how your work will provide tangible benefits to the community. Could be simple things as educational curriculum. Another thing I like to base this off of, and it's the Truth and Reconciliation 94 calls to action. And to move forward with the reconciliation, it's a process. And you can start with that cultural awareness, knowing our shared past. You move to cultural sensitivity, understanding the intergenerational damage that was done. And then you move to cultural competency, applying what you learn in your work in the spirit of reconciliation. And then you move to cultural safety, acting, becoming allies to change institutional policies that will work towards decolonization, reconciliation, and the healing that's needed. And you heard that. I encourage you to listen. Be patient. First Nations are on a path of healing. And some cases that your efforts may be disruptive. And so I encourage you to find the right people to talk to, because there's people in our communities that are working hard on that path of healing. They're the ones that are moving, passing on language, passing on teachings, doing ceremony, making sure the next generation is strong in those teachings. If they're busy trying to interact with outside groups, they're passing on that information like this, and the knowledge is like sand falling between their fingers. It can't be strong going to the next generation. So we have to kind of making sure that, and that's what I see myself as a person that can help be an interface, be a bridge, be a connector to groups like yourself, because I know there's a lot of people in my home that are working hard to ensure that the next generation doesn't miss what my parents or maybe even my grandparents missed because they were taken away to residential schools. Miigwech.
Do I exist as a human being? In Canada, we're given this little card. It's got my number on it. Other than that, I don't exist. My social insurance number is 447-905-092. I don't memorize this one. But it's following up what Clint was talking about, the residential schools. How does that feel if to lose your siblings at a young age? You don't know them. How do we reconcile that? Is truth and reconciliation enough? Or must you reconcile first? The truth, the trust was missing until we joined hands. So it's very important that we understand. When I was growing up, I didn't know my older siblings. I was too young to go to residential school. But every day after that, any strange car come on the resin, that mom hit us. Why? To protect us. Why? Because they were told, we'll give your children an education. But that education was one that was trying to take away who they were as Anishinaabe people. I don't use the term, or I try not to use the term of Indigenous or Aboriginal. I'm neither. I'm Anishinaabe. And I'm very proud of who I am. When we walk together later, guys, I may not see many of you ever, but I'll remember. What tells me to remember? Here. Come and walk that journey with, I got 2 volunteers so far to come and walk at the Cape. 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll have to take 2 groups. Okay, so it's very important that what you understand is you got to look through how I look through my Anishinaabe eyes, my worldview. Don't push my worldview away, but let's combine them so that we can work together. Back-to-back teaching doesn't work. Does it? I'll give you the illustration a little later, but it's just something that we need to. If you want truth and reconciliation, reconcile first. Come, join hands and talk, and let us be that voice together so that doesn't happen again. Miigwech.
Thank you. Okay. So the next question. Can you share a story or a project that shows how caring for land is connected to healing for people and ecosystems alike?
Did you write these questions? Yes. They're very good. They're also very striking in the sense that what you're hearing is keywords like relationship, integrity, reciprocity. That is the pulse of Mother Earth. And this changes the scope of my own personal reflection of what the land and healing and connection means to me. So a few years ago, I reached a critical breaking point in my life and my career. I reached a point of burnout, and after nearly 20 years of Indigenous governance, I just couldn't toe that line anymore. And the system I was serving, heavily indebted with politics, infighting, and exhaustion from that form of governance under the Indian Act. That system changed me, and I no longer recognized what I'd become. That collapse changed everything for me. And what it did, though, it sent me back to the land. I began walking, I sat, I began listening, I began fasting. And throughout that time, every single element, the earth, the air, fire, and water, what it did, it reflected something that I needed to heal inside. The land didn't judge me, but she held a mirror. So healing for people and ecosystems are not separate work. When we return to the land with humility, she teaches us how to restore ourselves. And in doing so, we protect her. See, my point is, what I learned is that we ourselves are the First Nation, individually and collectively. We are talking about the land, but we also, under that sacred relationship of life, we ourselves, individual human beings, are the First Nation. And so the land can offer that mirror, that reflection. And so what I learned for is caring for the land is how the land cares for us. It's not a program. It's a relationship of remembering. Thank you.
Anishinaabe stories say that our people had the ability to communicate with all of creation, but we did something in our past that disrupted that ability. Can you imagine that, the ability to communicate with all of creation? Our prophecies say that we'll rekindle that ability. Back in 2005, I had a stranger stop by where I worked at the Bkejwanong Heritage Center after everybody left for the day. He traveled from down in the States. He wanted to learn about how we did prescribed burns, as he heard through the internet that we did them there and do them. He shared that he was working with and learned from an old native man, a Pueblo Indian from New Mexico or Arizona, I can't remember. He was teaching him how to use plants as medicine, making teas, salves, extracting oils, etc. He spent many months and even years learning from this elder. Each time he visited and learned, he asked the elder, "What can I do to repay you for all that you have taught me?" Each time the elder said nothing. Months went by, yet the elder didn't want nothing in return. Then one day, after being taught a new lesson, this younger fella asked the old native man, "What can I do to repay you for all that you have taught me?" This time the elder responded, "You can burn this area, the area where my people's village is." "What?" said the younger fella. "I can't do that. I work for the nearby town's fire department. We're meant to put out fire, not start them." "Sorry, I cannot do that." Despite telling the elder no, the younger fella continued to visit the elder and continued to learn medicine, plants, and their uses. Each time he asked, "How can I repay you for teaching me?" Each time, the old native man said, "Burn this area where my people live." Months went by. This went on and back and forth and back and forth. Each visit, the old man made this repeated request. Finally, after being weighed down by guilt that he did not help the old native man, he decided to say yes. He followed the elder's direction and instructions as to how and when and where and what to do the cultural prescribed burn. And he completed the burn successfully. The elder was happy. A couple days later, this younger fellow returned to visit the old man and told him that he was fired by the nearby town's fire department for doing the burn. He was furious. "Why did you insist I do that burn? It cost me my job." The elder shared that there was this native plant that used to grow in his people's village, but hadn't emerged in decades. It was a plant that benefited from cultural prescribed burns. It needed fire to help it do its thing. And before the old native man died, which he sensed was coming soon. He wanted to see this plant reemerge and to hear it sing. Sing. Can you imagine that, a plant sing? That's the gift that Creator blessed our people with, including this old Native man. It's told about in our stories. Well, long after the young fellow conducted that controlled burn in the small Native village, a massive wildfire ravaged the wider region, spreading across the wider region, causing millions of dollars in damage to homes and properties, much like what we're seeing happening in the US and Canada today. This younger fellow visited that small Native village sometime after, and to his surprise, there was no harm, no damage done in the Native village. The massive fire that destroyed nearly everything in the wider region simply went around the Native village, as there was no fuel to burn. It was all eliminated by the cultural prescribed burn that the elder requested. This younger fellow told me this story, and he said that he was starting a new volunteer fire department so he could continue the wise practice and teachings of this old Native man. As he left our Heritage Center, I felt like I had met a kindred soul, one that touched my heart and being. I continue to work towards tapping into the gift that the Creator blessed my ancestors with. I too want to hear plants sing. Miigwech.
When you talk to me, I understand. I'm just following up what Clint was saying, is when the plants sing, or when the trees sing to us, do we understand them? The trembling aspen, where the Mohawk people call it the laughing tree, that's all the medicine that we had long, long time ago. This time of year when the leaves are dry and the wind blows through, a song goes through it. You close your eyes and just listen to it. Trembling aspen over there. You need to get reconnected with nature. As part of this job that we have here, it's very important that you'll have a lot of naysayers need to vote. There should be more, 130 on there. We should fill that up and saying, we're very supportive that the government is willing to do this. We need to be mindful of who we are. We don't do prescribed burns anymore because of the rules and regulations of the townships. We haven't done a prescribed burn on the Nawash simply because of what the story Clint said. We don't want to have liability. And in that short period of time, so many invasive species have jumped up, choking out the Gattinger zagolinus, the gold groove flax, very rare plants that need to grow in that critical habitat. Don't be afraid to let your voice be heard. I wish that we were going for a walk. Those that want to go for the walk, you're going to have to hug a tree and tell that tree that you love that tree. In our language, it's gazagan. That's 4. Are you listening? Gazagan means I love you. Remember the importance of who you are as a human being. Simply going out and saying, I love you, to something that we don't understand. And when the trees sing to you, do we listen? Or are we on the phone, looking down, walking without paying attention to nature? Let's not lose that responsibility. Let nature speak to you, heal your heart and mind, so that once again, nature will be important to us. I can't say that enough. Since I was a little boy, I've studied nature. I didn't know the name of the birds, but I sure like watching them. So it's very important that we do that. You gotta connect. Feel deep here. Don't think up here. Science and Anishinaabe teaching can work together, but one can't be dominant over the other. We got to be equal. And then when you do that, we can walk together. Okay? Chimiigwech.
I was canoeing through the French River a couple months ago, and we passed through an area that had been completely burned. It wasn't a controlled burn at all. And there were a lot of little jack pines, and my partner said, oh, those seeds need to be burned in order for those trees to grow. So there are lots of species, big blue stern, little blue stern, that need to be burned. So you'll if you travel to Alderville First Nation, they have a black oak heritage prairie, and they burn that every year. They do controlled burns, but that's on reserve. Okay, we don't have a lot of time left, so I'm going to ask one last sweet question. I'm sorry to have to skip by a few.
Uh-oh, yeah, we got the warning.
Yep, we're getting the warning. Okay. The last question is, what gives you hope right now in the work of conservation?
What gives me hope? Before I answer that question, I just want to highlight a few important things. To really understand the history of Indigenous peoples is to know the North American history ourselves. Colonization isn't just our story, it's only a part of our story. And how we heal and how we integrate and to move on, it's an individual responsibility that we all have to take on to know Canada's or North America's history. Second to that, important thing about corridors. Corridors is connected to song ceremony and our way of life. That's why I support the Escarpment Corridor Alliance. In my previous work, working with black bears, this area, because of development, has been a natural severance for black bear movement. And black bears are the chief clan species of our clans here in North America. So the reconnection of corridors means the revitalization of that song ceremony and way of life for all living things. And finally, what gives me hope is that in my career, I've seen an increasing willingness to participate, to know, and to learn. And I think that's what gives me the most hope. And people have been coming willingly, not out of obligation. And so hope for me lives in that moment when we can stop trying to save the earth and start allowing us to teach. Let me start again. When we stop trying to save the earth and start allowing her to teach us again. Thank you.
What gives you hope right now? No hopes, only intentions. It's in my blood. I'm reminded by my ancestors that walk beside me of the teachings and the practices passed on, by the love that I feel and experience from Creator, Bkejwanong. Allowing ourselves to be guided by Spirit, to move beyond, let go of our intentions, to be open to Creator's intentions for me, for you. Creator has purposes for me and for you to undertake. You can learn what those purposes are through ceremonies, dreams, listening to with your heart, and yeah, you can actually feel and hear messages through your heart. I have. All of creation continues to follow Creator's original instructions. You heard that from Miptoon. That Creator gave them originally. It's us who have forgotten to live by our original instructions. My friend and elder Dan Longboat says, Creator instructed humans to love and care for one another, to learn from and live in balance with all of creation, and thirdly, to simply give thanks. I got a story, quick one here. I have a friend who's non-native. He's older than I am. He's been working in the conservation and habitat restoration field for decades. He's involved in nature clubs, teaches about trees, birds, and nature. He's helped buy and protect forests and other habitats that were in jeopardy. He spent tremendous amounts of time outdoors. He's quite knowledgeable. Some time ago, he shared with me that he sought a deeper connection to nature. He wanted to learn from nature itself, to commune with nature. So he set out just to do that. He has affinity to trees, so he thought, So he thought he would sit next to a big oak tree he knew of, which is located in a small woodland that he helped buy and formally protect. He spent several days and hours going back and forth to the site to sit propped up against this big oak tree. Yet nothing. He thought maybe he was at the wrong tree, so he found another tree. Still nothing. Then he thought, well, he would try connect with a massive cottonwood tree in that same woodlot. But nothing after hours of trying to be one with that tree. He was frustrated and losing patience. Nothing was happening. He decided to call me and share his frustrations while he was still there in the wooded area. I was doing some field work myself when I got this call. I asked him, when did he get this affinity to trees? He explained when he was a boy, he would sit, play under this massive sycamore tree in the schoolyard where he went to school growing up. He loved the mottled patterns of the sycamore's bark, the look and feel of its leaves, the brilliant colors it showed off each fall. I suggested that he go and sit under a sycamore tree in the woodland he was in, as I knew there was some there. A few hours went by. Then I got another call from my older friend. He was crying this time. He received messages. He felt them and he heard them. There's even a large owl that sat nearby watching him the whole time. That experience helped him to write a book, 2 books actually, and possibly more on the horizon. So it is possible for you to commune with nature in deeper ways than you can imagine. You just need to try.
I like listening to the young guys. They're gaining their wisdom as they walk each and every day in the teachings. And as we do this, you will remember. While we're on this earth, our mother takes care of us and nurtures us. When it's our time to go to the spirit world and we're putting to the ground in the old way, our body nurtures our mother. Very important that you understand that when that's taken away, that doesn't happen. So it's just something that we need to find out who we are, what do you want to do, and understand the culture. I'm not going to brag or anything. I got a master's degree. You know where I put it as soon as I got it? I put it in a box, and I haven't pulled it out since. Why? I want the people to look at me, not what's behind me on the wall. And as you do that, then you can rekindle some sort of relationship that we're trying to develop. That's who we are. We shouldn't be strangers. Miptoon, that's my name. Makwa, Dodam, Ninda, I belong to the Bear Clan. Niashingaming is my home. Pane means always. And in conclusions, I would like to say, what is it now? Gazagan. You are very good students. I'll give you 10 out of 10, okay?
Miigwech, Miptoon. Okay. Miptoon, do you want to come back for a photo potentially? I did want to say thank you and Miigwech to everyone who came, especially for you 3 and for all this wisdom and the words from the heart that you shared and the careful thought out language that you shared with us. I also wanted to say Miigwech to the Escarpment Corridor Alliance for creating a space for us to share this and for all of you to come and be here. And I wanted to say many of us came here today with questions about how to include Indigenous voices. I hope you leave with a deeper awareness of how to follow Indigenous leadership, not only in principle but in practice, through relationships, shared decision-making, and long-term commitments. If you take one thing from this session, let it be this. Conservation is not just about protecting land. It's about repairing relationships with the land, with Indigenous peoples, with each other. Its work is ongoing, it's uncomfortable at times, and it asks something of each of us. I'm going to leave it at that.
Let's give him a great big hand.